Happy spring from Sisters Hill Farm. We are out here in the greenhouse getting ready to start seeding, and I wanted to show you a little bit about some cool benches that we have in different versions over the years. So our original version was this bench right here. Built this probably in 1999, and it's starting to get a little wobbly. I did diagonal legs because I figured splayed legs would be more secure. And I also figured by moving these two rails in from the sides, I would have more strength across the bench so it wouldn't bow. And this worked out really well, but then my next version of this bench was simply design number 2, and it's upside down right now, but this was just 4 legs, one in each corner, and just using the 2x4s themselves as diagonal braces. And that was a good bench, good solid bench. And what we did is I cut down the 2x4s to 2x2s for the cross bracing. And you can see I have them at different spacing here, and that's, I think, because I reinforced it over the years. The next version was going with wheels on them, and they were on the ends for a while. And then finally we came up with a design, thanks to one of my former apprentices. They made the same benches but improved them by putting the pivot point of the wheel about 2/3 of the way down the bench. And this way it's very easy to lift it even if there's a lot of weight on it, because you've eliminated half the weight. It's counteracting the other half. So what we use these for is for quickly hardening off entire trays. So we do 30 cell trays worth of plants all at once. Somebody can get them out of the greenhouse and harden them off. So that worked out really well. And we also have pneumatic tires on some of them. We've got a whole bunch of different versions, but we really like the pneumatic tires, but they do eventually get flat. So those are a little more maintenance than the solid tire. The new idea now is that we're going to do, so you can see this is cracked, this 2x2. So the 2x2s aren't quite as strong. So we're going to leave a full 2x4. So when you're building something like this, it's nice to be able to set up a repetitive stop. You can do this with any number of tools. You can do it with a hand saw. You can do it with a circular saw. You obviously would need a square right here for drawing square lines across the wood. I like to set up a stop if at all possible. So we've got a chop saw here, and we have the work supported, and every single cut will be the same length because it registers against here. And then we make our cut, and now we know that all of our cross pieces going across the table will be exactly 46.5 inches. So that's the first step. We're going to cut these, and then we'll cut our legs and go from there. Okay, so one of our concerns with building this new bench is we really want it to function well. And one of the problems we've had over the years is that the benches do sag a little bit in places. So if you've got a couple of different trays here, and they're going to be watered differently, it's going to flow off of them differently. So our favorite combination of this, we're trying to minimize material. In other words, minimize our cost and minimize our environmental impact, but also make sure it functions really well. So what we're doing here is, this bench was our best one, and this is very close to the exact length between supports of one of these trays. And so they all sit on this bench really well, but it's still off by just a little bit. So what we did is we actually laid the trays right on top of the 2x4s, and we're going to mark where each one will, the center of each cross member will be. And then that will set us up for having great support along the entire bench, and the whole bench top will be nice and flat as we use it with these 120. Now, once you've got that mark, you can come a little closer, Ella. So that was the center mark. I just measured over 3/4 from each center mark, made a line, and then put an X to the right of it where I want my kerf, or not a kerf, but where I'm going to attach the wood. So then I'll put my square across both pieces, and that will be where my intermediate support will go between the two edges of the bench. So I'll just slide along here, mark those all off. So this is actually a welding clamp, but for what we're doing, it's actually making it quite a bit easier, because one of the problems is when you're trying to screw this together, you got to hold it in place. It's not too difficult, but it's a little bit awkward. Get your drill, get your bit, have everything all set, and then try to align it, before your bit drops out and everything else. So everything's rocking off the table. So this is pretty nice, because what I can do is I can just pop this in place, and I can get these two lines, my line over here aligned with where I want it. And I can just grab a clamp and clamp that down. And then I can take the same with this and just grab a clamp and clamp that down, and it squares everything up for me really nice. One of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that this is nice and flush with this and right on our line. It's not super important that it's exactly on that line, but we do want it flush with this so the bench doesn't sag right there. So I was having a little bit of trouble getting it set up right on the line, and what I decided is let's just use a short scrap piece here. We put our scrap piece exactly on the line, and then I can clamp it, and see these tabs on the top register that perfectly flat. And now these two other tabs, I just need another piece. These two other tabs will make sure that it's also in that same plane. So we can get our piece in here, lift it up, and now it's nice and square. And as long as it's hitting both of those tabs, it's also in the same exact plane. So I just need to lift it up ever so slightly there. And we've got it. So now when I screw that in, it's going to be nice and flush, and I don't have to fiddle with trying to hold it while it moves on me and everything else. And actually, these end cuts are not very square. Probably should have checked the saw first. But that way, I don't have to fiddle with anything, getting all these in. And they're exactly where I want them, and it's nice and flush right there. So, not necessary at all, really, but it's just kind of a quick and easy way to get it, especially if you're working all by yourself. I just want to do a little simple rounding. So I set the saw to a 20-degree angle, and I already did a test cut, but I just marked a little mark right there on the saw so I could trim off each end. So I'll quickly make those cuts. And that'll just keep the bench from snagging when you roll it around and stuff. That's the legs. So I'm just going to put that in there. Everything's nice and square. Clamp it up. And I can put a couple screws from the outside. Okay, so that's not going to be sturdy enough though. So our next step will be to cut some diagonal braces with the scrap that we have remaining. We'll do one each direction here, and we'll do one that direction there, and then that'll give us enough rigidity that we can move these benches around. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why we choose the wheel design we've chosen. And in the past, I just wanted something that was pretty simple. So what I did was I just drilled a 1/2-inch hole through the legs toward the bottom, and then used a piece of 1/2-inch solid steel, and then just used these wheels with a 1/2-inch axle. And then there's cotter pins. I just drilled a hole through them and put a cotter pin in. And so some of the problems with this is when there's a lot of weight on the bench, it actually bows up in the center, as you can see there, and it torques the wheel toward the wood. And you can see this wood is a little bit worn just from rubbing that wheel on it. So it's not perfect. Also, sometimes these get caught on things, and so I don't love this design, but it works quite well, and it was pretty simple to build, and you don't need any specialized tools. And the one problem, I love these pneumatic tires when you're going over rough ground, but as you can see over here, we have some flats. So, you know, they go flat, or sometimes they pop or whatever over the years. So we've also used these solid ones here. And the solid ones are a little bit less easy to move around, but you don't have that popping issue. So let's see what we got new over here. So the new idea, now it involves a little bit of welding, but I've welded onto a little piece of plate, a 1/2-inch rod, and then I'm just going to put a couple washers behind the wheel and slide it through, and then I have a cotter pin, hole drilled for that. I'm just going to use these screws here. So let me start to get one set up over here. So right about there. Okay. So I'll get the other 2 screws in later, but the wheel goes like this. Slide that on there. Throw a couple washers over it. And then if I drilled my hole right, it's a tight fit. Perfect, yeah. So I'll just tap that up there with a hammer, and that wheel's ready to go. So, of course, you still need reinforcement, because just this straight leg wouldn't do it, but we're going to do a diagonal here, 2 diagonals here, and it should be a nice setup. So the next step is we're actually going to reuse as much as possible from these old benches. So this mesh I'd like to try to use again. And we have these chicken staples in here. And so this is a really cool tool made by Crescent, looks like. And what you do is you just squeeze down on the tip of your staple and pry back. And it pulls them right out. So this is a very easy way to remove nails and things that are sticking up the ways, but this is super easy. And so that's the way we're going to remove it, and then we're going to try to straighten it back out a little bit. And we'll probably do that by, my thought is to put a piece of pipe across somewhere and sort of roll it over it and naturally create a bow as if we were going back on the roll that we originally got it on. And then we can just roll it down and hopefully that'll work, but we'll see.
2, 1.
So for the diagonal braces, what I'm doing is I'm just putting a piece of 3/4 inch plywood or something under there, so that it flushes out on the top surface. And then again, I'll just use this wonderful welding clamp here and set that in, and then this lines up real nice. Pop a couple screws in here. I did the first couple just holding them in place without the clamps, and I was like, wait a minute. I could make my life a lot easier by just utilizing a clamp. So especially up here where you're trying to get it at an angle and everything else, you can pre-start these by holding the wood, but it's still much easier this way. Gotta kick this over a little bit with my thumb press. There we go. So now this thing is rock solid. We've got it reinforced in 3 different directions, so I can't wait to flip it upside down and get some mesh on it and see how these wheels function. But I think testing the bench with Ella. Here we go. Hold on tight, Ella.
Yeah, holding on.
All right. Flawless. Look at those wheels. I like it. So does she.
Wow.
Funhouse rides. So this is the setup we've got for trying to straighten out that mesh a little bit. We just clamped a couple blocks, put a piece of pipe through it here up on the loader, up above our head height, and we're going to grab the stuff and try it. Okay, so what we were just doing out there over the loader was we were trying to take some of all the little undulations out of this, and it ended up cupping this way a little bit, so now we can kind of pull it on down, and there's a lot less of these ups and downs. So you can also do a little bit with your hands and get it where you want it and stuff. But then what we want to do is the overall dimensions of this bench are 49.5 side to side. So we've got 3/4 of an inch. We're heading right down the center with a 4-foot piece of fencing. And then the other end is 10 feet overall length. So I'm just going to set that right in here. And what you can do is you can use poultry staples, and that's definitely what I used the first year. Even though I'm showing you some fancy tools, you can do all this with really low-tech kind of stuff. So try to get that good side to side there. Lay your poultry staple over one of your connections and tap that down. And then pull nice and tight to the other side. Whoop, shift it a little. Could you just grab that for a second?
Yeah.
So I want to get myself a nice straight line this direction. Pop another one in. Whoopsie. There we go. So now what you can do, a little trick that I've learned over the years is, now what you can do is you can actually take a landscape rake and stick it in the end and then you can apply nice even pull right across the whole thing and get it nice and tight. So actually I'm a little bit off. There we go. So I can get it kind of lined up like I want, and then I'll probably have Ella give me a hand here and just pull that down while I staple all along the edges and the intermediate pieces. And the whole thing will be nice and tight and a lot flatter than it would have been if I was just pulling it down, stapling it as it is. So that's our next step. The other thing we can do is what I use is a narrow crown stapler with 1-inch 18 gauge staples. So that, if I put on my eye protection here, you just right over it and pop it in. And so that's a lot quicker and easier than trying to hammer those things in. But of course you don't need these tools to make it happen, but it certainly makes it a little bit handier. So we'll have this done in a few minutes.